5 a.m. on the dot. It wasn't uncommon for me to wake up at this time. Something internally would rouse me from my sleep at this exact time every morning. I was partially grateful for this. I could look out my window and take in the slow rise of the sun on the horizon. My window looked directly out to the street that spanned its way up the main road. Cars sat on the pavement, making it relatively impossible to walk anywhere other than the middle of the road. Every weekday, Monday to Friday, at 5 a.m., I would see the same woman meandering her way down the road until she made it to the doorstep of her home about 50 yards away from my window. She looked about, I would say, in her late 20s, from what I could see. She was always immaculately dressed. Her white shirt looked steam-pressed. Her shoes were polished and gleaming in the morning light. Her hair was a searing auburn red, which delicately caressed her shoulders in dainty curls. I felt almost connected with this woman, as if my waking were some kind of guardianship I had been issued. Instinctively, I would watch her make her way down the road and feel a sense of relief flow through me when I saw her disappear through her door. 5 a.m. on a dot. This time I swung my legs over the side of the bed, as I always do. I shuffled to the window, as I always do, and I saw, 6 a.m. No sign of her. Oh well, maybe she had an off day. I've heard a nasty cold had been going around. People don't always associate the crest of summer with sniffly noses and deep hoarse coughs, but those bugs are still there. I wish I would have known someone was looking for me. A voice came on the opposite corner of the room, a voice so cold and lifeless. It froze me into place, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly began to turn my head and look over my right shoulder. Soon the window entered my peripheral vision and I was looking directly at her. She looked almost translucent. Light from the window was still hitting her face, but there was no shadow. Her skin was crystal white. Her hair now had a dull color, her eyes a piercing blue. A wide band of redness encompassed the circumference of her neck. I wish I would have known someone was looking out for me, she repeated, her voice still cold. I wouldn't have felt so lonely.
Alice was the most beautiful girl I have ever laid eyes on. She was sweet and kind with confidence that shone brighter than the stars in the night sky. She had the milkiest white skin. Her hair was jet black, with emerald green eyes and natural blood red lips. The day she walked into my life, I knew we were meant to be together forever. It took me months to work up the courage to say hi to her, and when she said hi back, I was hooked. I did everything to make sure she knew how much I loved her. When she was sick, I would watch over her all night to make sure she was alright. I would spend hours just stroking her hair. She loved it. I made sure she started every week with a smile, with a fresh bouquet of flowers sent to where she worked. She was loved, and she loved me back. But then, things began to change. She started becoming withdrawn. She stopped leaving the house, wouldn't go to work. She wasn't going to tell me what was wrong, so I had to find out for myself. It didn't take me long to find out she was getting unwanted calls from a guy claiming to be madly in love with her. He was bombarding her day and night with phone calls, sending her creepy letters, saying if he couldn't have her, no one could. It was my job to keep Alice safe, and I promised her I would protect her, so I decided to stalk her stalker, and it didn't take me long to find out where he lived. He lived in a dingy apartment in a place known as Skid Row. I watched his movements. I watched his obsession grow. It was then I knew I needed to act. I broke into his apartment, knowing he was busy watching Alice. As I looked around his apartment, his obsession was a lot greater than I expected. He had pictures of her all over the place. That night, he came back into his apartment, not knowing I was lurking in the shadows. Watching Alice must be tiring work, I thought to myself, as he passed out on his bed. I crept out from the shadows. I stood over him, as his chest heaved in and out. I picked up a pillow and placed it over his head. By the time he knew what was happening, it was already too late, as he struggled for air, and before I knew it, his body went limp. It didn't take long for Alice to get her life back on track. She was back to her bubbly, happy self again. As I watched over her as she slept, I couldn't help but think, did she know how lucky she was? I stroked her hair as I leaned in to whisper in her ear, "Soon, my love, you will finally notice me and realize how much I love you."
I saw him on one of my usual walks along the bridge. It was a tall, middle-aged man in a cheap-looking suit. If anyone had asked me how I knew, I wouldn't have been able to answer them. You just look at his face, and you know. I approached him carefully, not wanting to spook him. "Sir?" He turned around quickly, his face drenched in sweat.
Who are you?
He replied nervously. "I'm Mandy," I answered with a smile. "You should move away from there," I said, pointing to the edge of the bridge where he was standing. "It's pretty dangerous." He looked at me for a few seconds before speaking again.
What are you doing here?
He sounded out of breath. "Oh, I come here often. I wouldn't say it's my favorite place in the world, but it's quiet, and I like that." I smiled at him again. He shuffled his feet and looked down at the water below.
You really shouldn't be hanging out in a place like this. Your parents must be worried sick.
He sounded calmer, but wouldn't meet my eyes. "My parents know I'm here," I spoke softly. "They know I like to help people like you." He turned to me as a look of honest surprise washed over his face.
What?
I looked at him unblinkingly. "I know you want to jump, but you're scared, and you should be." The look on his face changed to one of uneasiness. He tried to say something, but nothing came out. "It will hurt like nothing's hurt before, and that's just the fall. The aftermath is even worse." His eyes widened, and he shouted,
Get out of here! You don't know what you're talking about.
He sounded more alarmed than angered. I continued to look at him as he breathed heavily and pointed to the pictures and flowers attached to the railings just behind him. "Actually, I do." He looked in the direction I was pointing, taking a few seconds to process what he was seeing. He then turned around slowly to look at me, pure horror on his face.
How are you?
At that moment, I knew I had saved him. At least for now. He stood there for a moment longer, frozen, unsure of what to do. Then he did the best thing he could, simply turned around and ran. Fast. I dropped my shoulders and breathed a sigh of relief. I walked over to the railings and just sat there, looking at the pictures, "We miss you, Mandy," was written on a big card, decorated with hearts and flowers, right next to my yearbook photo. "Gone too soon," said another, surrounded by teddy bears, clothes, and lots of flowers. It all looked so pretty. "My name is Mandy. I was 19 when I died, and now I try to help people live."